Interesting man. He was born in California, I believe, and unlike the other Bones characters that were in that class, friends of my father's, he had not been to prep school, one of the fancy prep schools on the East Coast. He went to public school in California, which I do believe they must have had extremely good public schools back then, because Chuck Spofford was quite a scholar, and he was a very good musician. And very high up he became after World War II, which he served in Europe, as a lieutenant or something. After he got out, he was promoted way high up to one of the top positions in NATO, the North American Treaty Organization, and went on to be very influential in diplomatic circles. This is coming from being a boy in the public school system in California, rising to just really the highest heights imaginable. So that's Chuck. The other members that are shown there are close friends of my father's, Rebel McCallum and Fred Haynes, I think. I'm not going to tell you where they all are. My father is in the picture somewhere there in the second row, I think. And Edwin Blair, who was called Mr. Yale always because he was a great fundraiser for Yale. So he was Mr. Yale. He was also the gentleman that invited my dad to go out to Bohemian Grove for 1 week or whatever it was. That it was through Edwin Blair that my father did go out there, and when he returned, you know, he wasn't terribly impressed with what was going on there. He said the food was excellent, the lectures were pretty good, everything was done very nicely, but he would never go back. So I'm making excuses for my dad because I don't think he was ever really very happy with the agenda, the Yale agenda, the Order's agenda, although he stayed close to his friends. As you can see in this picture, they're all having a very good time on someone's boat or on the dock somewhere. This is the Skull and Bones grandfather clock. These clocks were given to members of the order when they got married. And my father was married in 1927, I believe, and he ordered the clock from a clockmaker in South Carolina, and I think that the order pays for the clock. And it was a gift, and all of them receive a clock when they get married. I believe that's the case. And we had it in our house from the time I was born, of course, and I remember it best because it's so mellow, and I would, as a young child, you know, waiting for Santa Claus to arrive, go to bed at night, and the clock would, you know, go off at every hour. And my mom and dad, of course, were putting things under the tree and giving Santa Claus his peanut butter sandwich and banana. And I was sleeping and listening to the clock. And then finally around, 5, it would strike 5, then 6. And I'd know, well, I can get up now. And I'd run down, and Santa Claus had been there, and the sandwich had been eaten, and the clock would strike 6:30, and then everybody would have to come down and deal with me. So I just have great memories of the clock. And what the significance is with the clock, Dad used to always say, he was very firm about that. He never told us why, but don't ever let the clock wind down. Keep the clock wound sharp. And always keep it 5 minutes ahead. And what that means, maybe it means they're 5 minutes ahead of everybody. The order has to keep 5 minutes ahead of all of us. And don't let it wind down, because if you did that, they'd be getting 5 or 10 minutes behind or more. And as a member of the family, you never talk about the order. My father never discussed anything about the order of any significance, really. Although, as we said earlier on, most of his friends were very close. Very close friends were the order, and all of them, all the ushers in his wedding, were Skull and Bones, the order, and friends all the way through life. But that had nothing to do with his own personal beliefs and all. He was not involved in any major political decisions affecting our country or our schools or anything. He was a wonderful mayor of several towns, a very strict constitutionalist, which certainly doesn't go along with what the order stands for. I mean, he would really cause trouble on the board if anybody deviated from the Constitution. So that's just a little bit of a defense of a member of the order, my dad. And as you heard earlier on, you know, before he died, he did say that he would help me if he could, if he had longer, right? So hopefully there are more members who've come to that conclusion, and maybe someday we won't have a problem with the order. I hope that the order doesn't continue causing all of us the problems that it's caused in the past, though, especially in education. Now, we're going to get into the books. The books were originally, they'd never published the list of members in book form before. At least that's what my father told me. One day when he was ill, this is the catalog of the membership of living members, volume 1. I think it's around 1978, the date on this. Well, that one's 1977. Let's take a look at this. Oh, no, see, this is October 1983. This is what happened. Dad, I was taking care of my father. He was dying of cancer in New Jersey, and my sister and I would rotate, go down there. We didn't want to put him in a nursing home. So one day, it was pretty close to the end of his life, the mail brought these 2 books in the mail, which are, one is this one, Volume 1, The Living Members, the catalog of the living members as of 1983. And this is the catalog of all the members as of May 1977. This is the living and the dead. As of May 1977. So this is really the updated one right here. Anyway, I was opening the mail because my father wasn't well. I was taking care of all the business things and mail correspondence, and these arrived. And so I took them into Dad, and he said, "Cool." He said, "They're getting pretty fancy up there in New Haven." You know, he said, "What are they doing? Never been in book form before." And that was his little comment. And so I said, "Well, it is, you know." So we, around that time, I was working with Anthony Sutton on something, because I was always very interested in U.S. policy towards the Soviet Union, and he had done such remarkable work, aside from his great book, which came out subsequently on the order, but his work at the Hoover Institute in regard to United States transfer of technology and all sorts of information and money, etc., to the Soviet Union from the time of the Bolshevik Revolution. And so Sutton was very highly respected in that field, and he told me, it just was a fluke really, that he happened to call right at the time when the books had arrived, because he said he couldn't understand what it was all about. And I said, "Well, you may be interested, I think, you know, in the order at Yale." And he said, "I am." He said, "I am interested in that." He said, I don't understand the connection." And I told him that I had the lists in book form. And he said, "You do?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Would you mind lending them to me?" And he said, "I'll get them right back to you, I promise." And I believed him, and I sent them, and he did get them back. And he called me, and he said, "Charlotte, with all the research I've done through the years on U.S. aid to the Soviet Union in every imaginable aspect, once I got these lists copied," he went to a copying place to get it done. He must have done a pretty good job, because they're still in good shape. I put them down on the dining room table, and I looked, and all of a sudden I knew I had found what I was looking for. I'd found the names of the people involved in in the foreign affairs of the United States, especially in the transfer of secrets and weapons, etc., and nuclear stuff to the Soviet Union, and banking as well as banking. And he said, and he also mentioned Hitler. He said, I saw the movers and the shakers, and it became very clear to me that this one organization was, if not totally responsible, almost completely, really up there in responsibility for American foreign policy and economic policy. And so, and then subsequently, we found out education policy. I didn't know that at that time that Sutton was that deep into doing the research on education. I think he did the best job on education research of anybody I can possibly think of, using, and I'll show you in a minute, the incredible research done by, in the Leipzig Connection by Lance Leone, the Leipzig Connection. I'll show you a picture of that book later. Sutton used that, I used it, and anyway, that is the history of these little black books, which he returned to me. And he was a very great gentleman. He said, I really didn't ask him to keep my name private, but he decided on his own not to let anybody know where he got them from. And evidently when, after my father died, he did, I guess, tell somebody, or maybe he didn't ever tell anybody. I'm not quite sure. I told people. I didn't really care, But I do want to point out right here, at the end of my father's illness, before he died, because he had heard me discussing foreign affairs and education, especially with Phyllis Schlafly, who was putting together the book Child Abuse in the Classroom, which is a great book for parents out there watching if they want to really find out all about truly documented programs that were used in the schools between 1965 and 1985, when we had the Protection of People's Rights Amendment hearings. The documentation is in that book, Child Abuse in the Classroom, which is at americandeception.com. A marvelous book. And Phyllis and I, at this time, when I was taking care of my dad in 1984, were talking on the phone constantly about what was going on with global education, all the horrible values-destroying programs, role-playing, psychodrama, the worst stuff, death education, survival games where the kids have to decide who's going to be allowed in the lifeboat and who isn't, depending on what your category is in life. This stuff, my father was listening from the other room, because we had him downstairs in a room next to the kitchen so we could take care of him. And so he must have had some, I think I brainwashed him. I think I brainwashed my father at the end of his life, because a week before he died, he looked at me. First of all, I said, did he want to read the New York Times? He was not. He really was at the point where he didn't read much. And I gave it to him, and he just threw it on the floor. He was lying in bed. He threw it on the floor, and he said, if I had more time, I'd help you. So that was really wonderful, that at least I feel at the end of his life, at least he understood his daughter. That was nice to know. He used to say to me, Char, you're a very good writer, but I don't know whether I like what you write about. And I thought, well, that's a compliment from you. You're a good writer, too, and a speaker. He was always a very fine speaker. But I thought, okay, I've come a long ways. He thought I was a good writer, but didn't like what I was writing about or what I was saying. And then finally he said, if he had more time, he'd help me. So you can say that I'm not making excuses for Skull and Bones members, but you could say that a good percentage of each class is really quite innocuous, even though they may still go to the island, where they have the camping and all that, and Dad did that. And even though they may be bound to vote for the Skull and Bones candidate, like my father always voted for Bush, and my mother was a Southern conservative who would vote for Barry Goldwater, or make a mistake like I did and vote for Reagan.